Welcome into the November 2nd episode of the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. It's a Maple Leafs game day, ladies and gentlemen. The Leafs are back on home ice, and they'll host the Philadelphia Flyers tonight. Try and get things back on the rails after that awful road trip out west. There are some lineup tweaks to tell you about, and an update on Timothy Liljegren as well. Some good news. We'll tell you about that and more on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother on TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from. You can also now catch us up on video formats. Just look us up on YouTube. It's Locked On Leafs on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? Go ahead, hit subscribe. Get that new Leafs content delivered directly to you each and every day, Monday through Friday, all season long, because that's what we do here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. And it's been a tumultuous little week and a half here, though, Dave. It really has been. And it seems like whenever there's a couple of days after a tough game, things start to boil. But it seems like today, maybe the Leafs can get things back under wraps because they got the Philadelphia Flyers coming into town. Night 2 of a back-to-back. This should be a game in which the Maple Leafs can try and get back on their winning way.
Yeah, getting back at home, hopefully maybe being off, not being on this road trip, getting back home, getting in familiar and comfortable surroundings can maybe bring something out of this team. Although they hadn't been playing well at home either before they went on this road trip.
Technically, I think they got 3-1 home record far this year. The one loss coming to the Arizona Coyotes, yes. But I mean, they've won 75% of their home games, so I guess that's a positive that you can take out of their home record. But to your point, they just haven't been playing well at all this season.
Yeah,
right?
That's really it, right? 3-1 record, very close games. So it's not like they were having great performances at home. That's kind of where I was getting a line to saying. But no, I just think, you know what, those road trips, especially early in the season, are tough.
Yeah.
Right. They've played a lot of hockey already for the first 10 games. Like it's not easy. I mean, obviously early in the season you're expecting the guys to be kind of in a groove a little bit, but that's a tough road trip to do right in the beginning of the season. So maybe being back at home, that gets them kind of back to just a reset. Sheldon Keefe kind of said after practice today, it's a new month. We're going to look forward. We're going to turn the page.
Yeah,
turn not just one page, maybe just throw that book into the fire and never speak of it again.
Yeah, chapter 1 was so bad, we're going to toss it into the fire, start a new book, and the new book starts tonight with a game against the Philadelphia Flyers, and we're going to see some new lineups too, Dave, tonight, which I appreciate. I guess when you come off a tough road trip, I think going back to the same old gets stale, I suppose. Although there's been a lot of change actually over the last couple of games. He has kind of thrown the lines into a blender, and the top 6 is pretty much what we started the year off with. So this is what the lineup looks like going into tonight's game. But there are some differences to the bottom 6, and more in particular to the blue line, which we'll get to in just a moment. But starting with the forward group, Bunting, Matthews, and Marner are going to remain as the top line. Kerfoot, Tavares, and Nylander as the second line. So Kerfoot moves back up onto that second unit. Engvall, Pontus Holmberg gets the call up, along with Kalle Järnkrok as the third line. Zach Aston-Reese, David Kampf, and Dennis Mulligan will be on the fourth line. Before we get to the bigger changes, I suppose, on the third and fourth lines in the bottom 6, Nick Robertson, by the way, getting the scratch. We'll talk about that too in a second, along with Nicolas Aube-Kubel. So one of the big talking points that did we talk about this yesterday, or did I talk about this on Leafs Lunch? I can't remember. Sometimes the shows blend together. But Matthews and Marner, I think there was a talking point in a discussion today of whether or not they would separate those two and potentially just flip Marner and Nylander for a couple of games just to kind of see if that can get everybody going a little bit. But opting to roll with the top trio of Bunting, Matthews, and Marner once again. What do you make, I suppose, of kind of going back to the well with the original top six lineup here?
I think the benefit of sticking with it is now you're at home, you get to dictate the matchups. So you can maybe get these guys into more favorable matchups and keep them together. I personally will like to see it be a short leash if things are not going well for that top line. Like if they're not performing, sorry, then you got to make some moves. Like moving Bunting hasn't done it. So what's the other option? As you kind of alluded to, Marner, right? Like at some point, you just kind of have to give these guys a bit of a break. Just split them up for a little bit. It doesn't mean the relationship's over forever. Just a little break, and then I think just let them start the game. See if they can get it going. If not, then you can make the move. And at
Yeah.
least I just think being at home. If this was on the road still, I would have considered splitting them up. But now that you're at home, I think it's a little different how you can play this.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair to say. The bottom six, though, is where there's kind of the more shakeup, I guess you could say, because Pontus Holmberg, a guy who I don't believe has played a single game in the National Hockey League yet outside of preseason, is getting put in a pretty favorable position as the third line center alongside Engvall and Yarncroc. I thought that was a little interesting. I kind of figured that Camp swap those two, Holmberg and Camp, and let him center the fourth line, but they're going to give him a little bit of a rope here. And I did hear Sheldon Keefe earlier today. He spoke and he said that they tried a lot of people at center on the road trip, and they like the idea of having a natural center coming in, talking about Pontus Holmberg. And he's a guy who actually did play well in the preseason. He was in the mix for that fourth line center role. I believe he was at the very least, ended up getting sent down, obviously. But he's 23 years old. He's kind of at that age now where your late round picks start to bloom a little bit. So perhaps Pontus Holmberg, just some new life being jolted into this lineup potentially.
Yeah, and you know what? I think like David Kampf has been actually one of the few guys I've been impressed with over the last few games, just because he is trying, and maybe they just want to make sure that they're not loading up the third line too much. Like keep David Kampf on that fourth line, and he can that's his line to manage. He can and he's worked well with Aston Reese. I thought that fourth line.
But Engvall's worked. He's worked well with Engvall too,
Yeah,
right? So
true.
it's like he's not with Engvall anymore, which is where I thought kind of he's worked well. But I think a big part of Engvall's game too is the speed. Geno Mulligan's got some speed, so perhaps they're hoping that he can bring that element of speed to kind of help give Camp somewhat of an outlet if they want to try and break out on the fourth line.
And Malgin's with two defensively responsible players in Aston Reese and Camp. You're not, Engvall and Yarncroc can at least help Holmberg a little bit with that. But I think Holmberg, I think he'll work well with those. Someone thought maybe you'd reunite that like line that they had during the preseason with Nylander with Holmberg, but I just think they just want to keep Nylander and Tavares together. Didn't make sense really to split them up. But yeah, I think that could be it too. Just having some guys with just kind of balancing out a little bit, not loading up too much and leaving the fourth line to be kind of a mismatch.
So obviously, kind of elephant in the room here. You look at the 12 players. Not yet, Dave. You're going a little too fast, going ahead of us.
Okay.
The elephant in the room here, if you look, scroll up just a tad more, you look at the 12 players in the projected starting lineup for tonight's game against the Philadelphia Flyers. You look in the extra column, Nick Robertson is going to be scratched tonight. Nick Robertson, a healthy scratch, which is weird considering that to bring in Holmberg, they had to send somebody down. a paper transaction was made where technically Wayne Simmons was sent and loaned to the Marlies. But like, why, if you're going to scratch Robertson, why not send him down to the Marlies and get him into a game? They play
Yeah,
tomorrow night.
yeah, that's like I don't like this idea of flip flopping Nick Robertson. He's either got to be playing in your lineup with the Leafs or playing with the Marlies. He should not be in the press box. Like this is what frustrates me, and this is what's frustrating Leafs fans right now is that you're flip flopping with a guy that you should not be flip flopping with because he's someone you need to make sure is going to be productive for you, one way or the other. It just I don't think it sends a good message to Robertson. Has he been amazing? No. Has he been awful to the point where he should be scratched? I don't think so. That's my I don't know if like I just think that this is you're doing a disservice right now to Nick Robertson by having him in the press box, and you're totally right. If he's not going to be playing in the NHL, put him in the AHL. I think the Marlies are in town, so it's not like he's far away and you can't recall him.
And they got a game on Wednesday. Like he legitimately
Yeah.
could have played with the Marlies that night. I don't know if Keefe told him and has gonna have like an assignment form. He's like, hey, while you're off, watch what Kerfe's doing right. And then try and pick up on that, like a live video session, I suppose. Not video, but like you know what I mean? Watch it live and then try and process how things are going and what's right and what's wrong, and maybe try and implement some of those into your game or see what you're doing wrong, what others are doing right. I don't know. Maybe that's the whole process of it, where he wants to have him up top watching the game and learning from it. But at the same time, I don't know if I subscribe to that. If that is indeed the point of having Nick Robertson scratched again in this game. But why don't we take a quick break, and then when we get back, let's get into the blue line, Dave, because that's where things got a little spicy, is with the blue line for tonight's game. Leafs and Flyers tonight down at Scotiabank Arena. Before we get into it, though, Dave, I want to tell the good folks about one of our favorite sponsors of the show, Built Bar.
Yeah, Mike, we're gonna have to take a pause for a second. We're paused. We're good. Okay,
Yep.
great. Because you're going to try this. I'm talking about Built Bar's new reimagined flavors: cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, and coconut brownie topper. We're going. They're up in their game right now. Built Bar right now. They got white chocolate peppermint granola. It's Built's take on granola bar, so it's more filling and still insanely tasty. And cane brownie puffs. Built puffs are like biting into universe's most delicious cloud. Built Bar, like all these amazing flavors. Just as now we're out of the Halloween time, we're getting into the Christmas time. So they're up in their game big time. So first off, for anyone who hasn't tried Built Bars before, they are literally the best tasting protein bars ever built. And that's built in all caps, ladies and gentlemen. They're revolutionizing nutrition, as we know it, with 100% real chocolate, 17 grams of protein, and shockingly low sugar and calories, 130 calories per bar. All right. Mike and I have been trying these forever. Well, I've been trying ever since we started the podcast, and I've been buying these things like crazy. Can't get enough of them. People are asking me for them. They know I'm a big on these Built Bars. So we're going to let you in on a little secret here. You can actually save on Built Bars and get 15% off with your order if you use the code LOCKED15 at built.com. So that will get you 15% off at built.com if you use the promo code LOCKED15. So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to built.com, get those Built Bars.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We are hosts here at Locked On Leafs, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast. We put out episodes every day, Monday through Friday, giving you all the latest news of what's going on within Leafs Nation. And we already gave you the latest of what's going on with the forward group for tonight's game against the Philadelphia Flyers. But it's the blue line, which is rather interesting. So why don't we pull up that tweet again, and let's look through the lineup and look at what the blue line looks like. If you're on YouTube, you can look at it, and you can see it right now. That second pair certainly raises eyebrows, and we'll get to it in just a moment. But looks like it's going to be TJ Brodie and Justin Holl back together. Brodie, the babysitter, with Justin Holl. It makes a lot of sense, which means Okay, well, who's going to play with Morgan Riley, you ask? Victor Mete is currently slotted in as the second pair right shot defenseman alongside Morgan Riley, who moves back over to the left. We'll talk about that in a moment. Mark Giordano and Rasmus Sandin make up the third pair. And Timothy Liljegren was back at practice today, by the way. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But boy, was I ever surprised when I was perusing Twitter and I found out that some lineup rushes were starting to come out and people were starting to tweet these out. And I look at the defense and I see Riley and Mete together on the second pair. What do you make of that, Dave?
Well, it's clear that Justin Hall needs a babysitter, as you mentioned. It wasn't going to be Mark Giordano. So
Could have been.
it could have been, very well could have been, because it would have meant pretty much a Justin Hall demotion to the third pairing, because there's no way Mark Giordano is playing top 4 minutes right now. But the Mete and Riley one didn't surprise me as much, and the reason is because if you're moving Brody with Hall, they're not putting Rasmus Sandin on his right side with Morgan Riley. The Leafs just don't want to go down that road. And it's funny enough because Riley played on the right side with Sandin, and maybe they were going to stick with that, but I don't think Morgan Riley wants to do it. I just don't think that's what he's comfortable with. So the only option you got is Victor Mete. And what I'm thinking is, and we're bringing up Timothy Liljegren, I think that's the placeholder spot for Timothy Liljegren.
Yeah, completely agree with you. That's the only real explanation that I could give you for the way that this is shaken out is they're gonna play this game against Philadelphia. A pretty like they're playing a lot better this season than we anticipated. Though the underlying numbers aren't great. Like I was looking at it today. They're ranked 30th of 32 teams for their expected goals differential. So they're getting some really good goaltending, and they actually won literally like last night in overtime, 1-0. Carter Hart stood on his head and made like 36 saves. So they're just getting some solid goaltending. That was against the Rangers, who are a pretty good squad. But they're coming into tonight's game, night 2 of a back-to-back, played against a tough team in New York, went into overtime. So they should be a tired group, and the Leafs should be well rested. They've been home for a couple of days now, had an off day a couple nights ago, a good practice yesterday. They should be well rested and ready to go. So I guess you could sit there and say, for one game, let's see if Mete can handle the load of a Riley Mete pairing, and then all of a sudden Timothy Liljegren gets upgraded to off the LTIR and he gets into his active position and he slides right up in there with Morgan Riley, and you're looking on the Saturday, Sunday for the upcoming back-to-back Brody Hall, Riley, Liljegren, Giordano, Sandin. And that's pretty much exactly what I expected to see when this happened. But I just figured that they wouldn't roll the dice, I suppose, on Riley Mete tonight. I thought they would just keep it with Sandin and Riley, but I suppose they want to try and get these other pairings, another game to build some chemistry, and then up goes Liljegren on Saturday, and then they've pretty much got their 6 guys in place until a trade gets made or if Jake Muzzin comes back.
Yeah, and I think the benefit, I'm going to bring up the home ice because they can put Riley Mete in those offensive situations.
What they could also do is like they don't have to be completely married to these pairings, right?
Not at
Like
all.
if it's a defensive situation, you could put Brody alongside, or like Brody and Hall on the defensive side. But if you're offensively out there, you could toss Riley and maybe Sandin out there for an ozone draw, or you could toss Riley and Brody out there for a couple of shifts together, just so that you're not playing Hall and Mete so much. And maybe like a couple of those guys get a couple extra shifts, so you don't necessarily have to be married to these exact pairs each and every time two defensemen come on and off the ice. But for the most part, these will be what we see.
Yeah, and for one game, it'll be fine.
Yeah,
Because and even a lot of people in our Discord we're like, okay, like when's Lily coming back? Well,
Friday.
like we have to. That's why LTIR, like the rules are clear. He's done the 10 games, but the 24 days is the other one that needs to be done, and
Yes.
that's why we said it's likely not until the weekend that you see Timothy Liljegren. So Friday he will be cleared. That means his first game, Boston Bruins, throw him right into that fire.
Oh yeah, and he's right up in there into a top pair, top four role. There's no third pair easing him in. It's we need you, buddy. Get in there.
Luckily, he had that one game with the Marlies.
Yeah, good for him. It was a pretty solid game. I'll say, he played well in his conditioning stint. Was it one game or two? I know there was the one game where there was all those highlights, but he may have got into 2 games. But anyways, regardless, he'll be ready to play, I think, by the weekend. He was practicing with the team today. He wasn't at Marley's practice, which raised some eyebrows, and then he popped up at Lee's practice.
Yeah,
So I was like, oh, okay, that's all. He's practicing
he
with the
played
club
2
now.
games with the Marlies, by the way.
Perfect. So he's got a couple games under his belt, and then he'll be thrown right into the fire. He's got a back-to-back against Boston and Carolina Saturday, Sunday. Those are going to be 2 tough teams. Samsonov going to get the start also in goal with Shalgren backing him up. So that's going to be the lineup for tonight's game. So there's quite a few tweaks, mainly to the bottom 6, and then to the blue line. There's some tweaks there as well. So maybe that's the secret sauce that we're trying to formulate, or that Sheldon Keefe is trying to formulate to try and get a win and get this team back on the winning way. It's a new month, it's a new chapter, new book, as we alluded to earlier. So hopefully it can all kind of pay off. All right, we'll take one more quick break, Dave. When we get back, let's talk a little bit about we got our 3 keys to the game first and foremost, and then the Maple Leafs. All is good, apparently, in Leafs Nation between Sheldon Keefe and Mitch Marner. Let's maybe chat about that for half a second and talk about some of the stuff that was said at morning skate. So we'll do that and get to our 3 keys to tonight's game on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti, listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We got a Leafs game night tonight against the Philadelphia Flyers. John Tortorella's Philly Flyers. They're a tough team. They've been a good team, but they're coming off a loss against the New York Rangers, so they're on the second night of a back-to-back, which means Toronto should be getting a tired team. They're getting a rookie goaltender who's never won a game in the National Hockey League. There's a lot pointing to the fact that the Maple Leafs should most definitely win this game, but we know what happens in those games. David, what are the 3 keys Toronto needs to make sure that the narrative is not an ugly one come Thursday morning?
I'm sorry if I'm laughing here, because everything you just listed off there is just like, this is pointing to...
Oh, it's going to be a 2-1. The team's getting goalie. They're going to outshoot them 40-13, and they're going to lose 2-1 because Felix Sandstrom stood on his head, the guy who's never won a single hockey game in his life, and they're going to leave with 0 points. That's exactly what that points to, doesn't it?
Yeah, so first key, don't make this guy look like a Vezina caliber goaltender. Please. Please, just don't do that. So that's number 1 for me.
Okay, that is a very fair number 1 to have here. Number 2, and a key that I got here is just start on time, which I think goes hand in hand with it, right? Start on time. This is 8 of the 10 games so far this year. You've been scored on first. Get the first goal of the hockey game, and then continue to pounce and keep it going. Come on, keep it going. Build off of it, and it all starts with a good start right from puck drop. Another one, pressure the goaltender. Like I said, the guy's yet to win in the National Hockey League. Get to the crease, crash the net, shoot everything on goal, try and get sticks and deflections, make this guy move around and swim in his crease. That should be a way to open up some shooting lanes, should be a way to open up some space in behind the goal and get some pucks in behind the net. So that's another one. And then just play smart, play simple though. Like just play simple. Don't make the stupid plays like they tend to. Mitch Marner, don't be trying to twirl around up at the top of the zone and give the puck up the way you did against Anaheim. Like let's not do a billion cross ice passes that are easily getting picked off and sent the other way on the counterattack. Keep it simple, keep it smart. Let's win this hockey game.
Another one here for me. Do you know how bad the Leafs penalty kill has been the last uh, the last few games?
Yeah, not great.
So either stay out of the box or please do better on the penalty kill. That's another one for me. Like, the penalty, the special teams has been killing the Leafs lately. So I would say figure out a way to stay out of the box. Don't take those stupid penalties like the turnovers that lead to breakaways, and potentially not award a team a penalty shot that should have had a penalty shot, and then you take the penalty instead. So avoid those and turnovers. Stop with the damn turnovers because you get yourself caught flat-footed, and you force your goaltender to have to be Patrick Waugh every 5 seconds in the game.
Absolutely. So some keys there. Hopefully the Maple Leafs can go out there and check off all those boxes, come away with the full 2 points. On paper, they totally should, but we know how things have gone when they're supposed to win games on paper. Well, go and look. All but one loss so far this year have come to a non-playoff team from a season ago. So, and that one that was a playoff team was like the LA Kings. Does that even count? Nah, probably not.
They took the Oilers they took the Oilers 7 games.
Yeah, I guess you're right. You're right.
But
I'm not gonna blast the Kings, I suppose. Sorry, Sarah. Didn't mean to blast them. But regardless, I think that this should be a game that Toronto realistically needs to win. Like they need to win this one, and I hope that they go out there and play for their coach because there's just way too much drama going on with this team right now. A lot of it having to do with Coach Sheldon Keefe having to answer questions in the media like, do you feel like your job is on the line? You've got guys saying, do you feel like you need to play for your head coach tonight? Those aren't fun questions to answer. So go out there and answer them on the ice and show, yeah, look how hard we're playing for Keefe because we want to keep him around here because we think what we got going can work. We thought that in the summer. We still think that now. Now it's time to actually, take action to those words and go out with an outstanding 60-minute effort. And it's on Toronto. It's all on Toronto tonight, man. Philly's not going to beat you. You're only going to beat yourselves. That's the Maple Leaf way. And it's going to be a big one. Going to be a big one.
Yeah, like if you lose to a team that's they're playing tough, but they're not exactly seen as, a top team in the Eastern Conference. Like this is a game that the Leafs will be favored. So you got to act like a team that's favored to win the game and not a team that has to grind and fight a way to scratch and claw to get a win.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully it does happen and we can have a much better conversation on Thursday when we recap this game. But that'll do it for us here today on the show. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the podcast. You can subscribe to Locked On Leafs on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. That does it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow to recap the Leafs against the Flyers, a game which you can watch tonight. Enjoy it, folks. Until then, though, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.